Okay, hi, I am what you all know me as Venom here on the Great SB. And, um, I swear I'm not a weeaboo. I have like 5,000 cinema rolls, which are from Sanrio, if you know the people who make Hello Kitty. So there's about like 50 of those back there. There's also, I think his name's Zhao Caron, which is also from Sanrio, called the Tumbling Elephant. And then I have some alpacassos, which are these alpaca stuffed animals. They're really popular in Japan, and a Piplup, if you can see, which is Pokemon. Um, but anyway, so yes, I'm Venom, and I wanted to do this character thing because I have no life, and this is what my life revolves around. So I thought it'd be interesting most to talk about Vladimir because um, out of all of the characters I have registered on SB, he is the oldest, longest running character. Um, and his history is actually really interesting compared to the others, so I thought it'd be most interesting to talk about him. Um, and kind of like what Rye said, my talking about him is going to be pretty organic. I'm probably not going to answer the questions in the exact order that they are presented, but I promise I'll try to answer everything. But as for inspirations, I kind of have to start with the history. So, um, Vladimir, he started off actually many years ago. Yes.
Stay put.
I'm recording something.
Oh, I'm sorry. You stay Sorry. You can re-record it.
I just like recorded 5 minutes of it.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, as I was saying, he's actually the most interesting thing about him is Vladimir is a very, very long running character, and he originally was not my character. Many years ago, me and what is now my roommate, the one who just came in and interrupted me, um, had we role played together privately, and he stopped writing a long time ago. But um, a long time ago, we had this steampunk world that we had created, and he had a character named Well Fielding, which I know I understand is a really weird name, but I found it interesting. He had a character named Well Fielding, and I had a character named Affinity. And Well is essentially Vladimir. There are a few things that have changed because Vladimir is growing definitely on his own a lot more, but basically everything was essentially the same. Well, he came from an orphanage. He never knew his parents. He um, he grew up on the streets, and his goal one day was to be like the most famed and feared um, pirate in the steampunk world. So he wanted his own ship that he would fly in the air, and he wanted to be the most feared. And once he ran away from the orphanage, like Vladimir did, one of the first things he did after kind of running around with some gangs and stuff was that he got his first ship, first steampunk ship, and it kind of evolved from there. And eventually, he did become the most feared and powerful pirate to rule the skies, whatever. So that's essentially where Vladimir came from. Um, and back then he was very he had the same essentials in that he was incredibly intimidating, very thorough, very controlled. Um, but I would say how Vladimir has evolved differently from him is that Vladimir has um, was much more. I would say he was more charismatic. He was more kind of like if he wanted to charm his way into a situation, like whether that be through kind of like seducing a woman or um, convincing someone of something through deceit. Um, was much more charismatic that way, and Vladimir, I feel, does everything by just kind of sheer power and intimidation, as opposed to he doesn't have time to kind of act because he doesn't care about that. He doesn't want to make this false image of, well, I'm going to create this act so I can convince you of, whatever he needs to do. He just does it purely out of his own intimidation. So I would say that is mostly how he's been changing, and he's still changed, but yeah. So that happened a really long time ago, and it happened, I think, like last year. I had an idea for reviving him because he hasn't been touched in a really, really long time. And back then, he was my roommate's, like, one of my favorite characters of all time. And I felt that he was just too. I thought he was just too rich to let go. So I asked him if I could take him and base it off of his off of Well, and he said, yeah, I could do it. So that's what I did. And I originally wasn't going to make him Russian, which is actually an interesting part about him. Originally, he wasn't going to be Russian. I was still going to name him Well Fielding because I just adored that name and I felt it was very unique. But I was on this site, which I won't get into because a lot of drama went on with that site. But I was on this site called Risk, which was a um, kind of a realistic modern day supernatural site with shifters and vampires. Um, and when I wanted to bring him there, and I forgot the admin I was talking to, I think, suggested that he be Russian, and I didn't mind that at all, and especially because I was in the process of revamping him anyway and figuring out how I wanted to make him new and how I wanted to kind of revive him. I kind of just went off of what she said. I was like, okay, I can consider him Russian and kind of go with that. And I feel like it's extremely fitting now that I have him as a Russian character. Just like with the whole, like the Bratva and how he was in it for many years. Because obviously, since I wanted to bring him to a modern day world, I could do a steampunk fantasy site, or couldn't do a steampunk fantasy deal. So, yeah, I think it was a really good way to incorporate him. So, yeah, that's basically where he came from. And Affinity, the girl I played back then, and when my roommate, he played Well, was actually what turned out to be his lover. They were like rivals or whatever, but that kind of turns him on. So, and so actually, if you go and read Vladimir's shipper and go in his lovers, read his lovers section, a lot of what is in there, and especially the last sentence, describes Avidity. So, and one of the things is I was actually thinking about making a wanted ad for her, essentially, Because even though I like her as a character, I feel like someone else could do her more justice than I could. I also tend to be a little bit poor at playing females. Um, Only like a few really call out to me. And I mean, I've had a few, but I feel much more inclined towards Vladimir than I do Affinity. So I have never played her since. Um, and plus, because she's a bit underdeveloped, and I feel that even though I have like a solid basis for her, I feel like someone could really take that kind of like basic mold and make her into something more. But yeah, so that is where Vladimir came from. And after I've had such muse for him as a character because I don't know, I just have such muse for him because I feel like he's such a he has such a strong kind of voice and presence, and I feel he could. I've always felt he could like add so much to the dynamic of a site because of like his power and how he goes about making sure that power is asserted. But because of that, because his character is essentially power and dominance, he's always I always need to find a site to that is willing to allow me to have such a great position of power. And not a lot of sites do that. They don't, they don't want you to just. Usually that's kind of reserved for the admins, or they have to know you for a long time. So it's really hard for me to bring him into a new site and have him in a place where he is ruling, because most sites don't allow that. So that's why I'm so happy to play him at SB, because I'm like, yes, finally. It did not work out at Risk, the site where I was at, and I'm not even going to get into that story because we would be here for like 40 minutes, and I will spare you. But yeah. But so that was kind of a combination of what were the inspirations and what was the history. They kind of go together. But as for like things that make me think of him, like things that kind of inspire me for him, like for Vladimir, or like make me think of him, like anything that's leather, like a leather jacket, or like, kind of like the more edgy kind of leather, like a leather jacket or like leather boots. Because I've always pictured him riding a motorcycle, and at Risk he was going to, but so I just, I always see him as on this like sleek black motorcycle with a leather jacket, and just kind of like the obsidian, shiny black helmet, and, kind of pulling it off with his like military shaven haircut and, pulling out a cigarette. That's very extremely him to me. And also one thing that actually probably none of you know, I think Jade may know, but I've always too pictured him having one or two like dogs, kind of, that kind of it sometimes happens in like shows or movies where like the power, there's always a person in a position of power, and they have some sort of like purebred dog, or like two perfectly purebred dogs, like two Great Danes that are always like sitting by the desk kind of thing. And I always felt like Vladimir would kind of have that, and his his aesthetic, but also with the way he works. Because I think that dogs tend to, like those kind of dogs, like one, it asserts like a position of wealth because purebred dogs are really expensive, and also a sense of status because usually purebred dog stuff, like their father was a, won whatever show, or their mother was blah blah blah, to the whole politics of like dog breeding and stuff. But so it's just kind of like a sense of status and wealth, and also because dogs are, they're obedient to you too, and especially because I think they would be this kind of symbol for that kind of shows how much Vladimir can easily control people or assert his dominance. So, kind of like the sit, stay, lie down. And they would be extremely obedient to him, and they would know all their tricks, all their commands. And I feel like it would, just be a way to kind of show that. So I do think he has, like, at least one dog. Purebred Dobermans, probably. Because they're very sleek, and like they're like pointed ears and how their posture. So yeah, and I think I discussed this with Jade, but I think his name would be Bullet in Russian, and I don't remember off the top of my head what Bullet in Russian is, but I'd have to look it up again. So yeah, so like leather, Dobermans, cigarettes, which is a habit that he picked up in the Bratva, and he knows it's bad for him, and especially for someone who keeps in such good shape all the time, and knows he has to, because he doesn't believe in being the kind of leader that sits behind a bunch of strong-armed men, just kind of being like, have a bunch of security people protecting him and he can't do anything himself. That is like, he doesn't believe in doing that at all. So he knows it's bad for him, and he wants to quit, but he just doesn't, because it's such a habit he's picked up. Kind of like, drinking vodka, like he came out of Russia after being in the Bratva for like, I think it's, for so long. So probably almost 10 years. So it's just a habit at this point, but I'm sure that, I don't know, Ilya could probably convince him otherwise, but, yeah, so cigarettes, leather, Dobermans. It's really hard for me to find music that I'm inspired by from him, because he's so methodical and he's so hardcore, and it's hard to find, especially music with lyrics that have that kind of feel to it. So, yeah. As for formatting the app, the way I did, the first half of the app was a roleplay sample that I wrote for another site to register him on, which didn't end up working. So I just saved it, and I had never had reason to use it, but I wrote that because I feel that, again, it kind of shows his inability, not his inability, but his extremely low tolerance for bullcrap. He doesn't deal with people who lie, or just pansies that can't stand up for themselves. So, his time is valuable. So anything he does, if it's wasting his time, he will not deal with it. And if that includes killing someone who's wasting his time, he will kill someone that is wasting his time. So I feel that that's the reason I wrote that. And then the second half is his history. I think is extremely pinnacle to his character, like his growing up in the orphanage and never really being anyone. Because the whole point of him is the main thing is that he wanted to be someone that will be that will die being remembered. And he doesn't care that he is infamous. It's the fact that he will have done something that made a great impact, and people will remember him and write his name down in history books. So he's just concerned with being great, and you can be the greatest villain. So that's kind of how he is. And so I felt, the second half, I really wanted you guys to know his history. And I've had his bulleted history, just kind of like a list of things for a really long time, but that didn't really do it justice. So I kind of expanded on that, kind of went in detail on that, but I didn't want to go in too much detail because I think there's a lot of things that happened to him, like during the Brat Fund, during being homeless, that I think they're extremely interesting, but if I revealed it all up front, I thought that would just be disappointing for me and disappointing for people who roleplay with me. So, anyway, so yeah, that's why I did that, and I don't think I really have much else to say about him. I'm super excited to play with him so much. Because he will want to get the Russians rolling and cut out all the unnecessary people. So if you want to work with him, make sure you have a way to find that your character will say that they're, to prove to him that they're worth keeping, because he will cut out all of the unworthy people. But yeah, now his shipper's up, so hit up his shipper, and yeah. Anyway, that's all. Bye.